Welcome CSE 103 Fall 2020 to one of my favorite exercises using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the Show Hide Patrick exercise. It's a very simple exercise, and what it does is you click on a button and it shows Patrick, and when you click on the Hide Patrick button, can you guess what it's going to do? It's going to hide Patrick, and the text changes. First it says, "Where's Patrick?" And then it says, "Here's Patrick," and then when you hide Patrick, it says, "Where's Patrick?" again. So pretty simple stuff. So this will be an easy introduction to JavaScript. A little bit of HTML, a little bit of CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. I'll just show you the code here real quick just to show you that it's just a little. This is all the HTML, and we'll do that with Emmet, which will be really quick to do. The only difference with this kind of HTML is we're actually going to put a JavaScript function call. If you remember function calls from Python, it's going to be inside an HTML element, which is a little unusual. We can actually do it in JavaScript, but it's easy to do it here, and you'll know that it's right part of the button that's going to make it happen. And that's about it. We have an image here of Patrick. Now, when you don't see Patrick, we use CSS for that. Here's some CSS declaration blocks here, and there's one here for Pat. That's actually an ID identifying the Pat image. And I think in the notes I might call it the pick image. You could call it pick or Pat. We adjust his width and we put his opacity to 0. And guess what? If his opacity is 0, we can't see him. If we change his opacity to something else, like 0.5 or something like that, and we save it, there he is. There's 0.5. So opacity in CSS goes from 0 to 1. So 1 is 100%, and then you use decimals in between there. So we're going to start him off at 0 so you don't see him, and then it's exciting when you finally see him. What's making this happen is the interactive side of web development, which is JavaScript, which we have two functions, just like we did Python functions. These are a little different. They don't have def for the function definition. They have something called function. They have a function keyword, and we're going to have two functions. And can you guess what they are? One is show Pat, and one is hide Pat. And one of them is just going to turn the opacity down to 0 when you hide him, or turn it to 1 when you show him. And we're also going to have another line in here that's actually going to change the text. So it either says "Where's Patrick?" or "Here's Patrick." And that's about it. So pretty simple stuff, but it'll be a nice introduction to JavaScript. Oh, one other thing, just to show you, we can even change the font here and use a web font. I'll show you how to do that. That's optional. And let's start a new pen. So I'm going to go here to New Pen, which will wipe out this pen. And you could go up here on the pen and call this 17 for fall 2020. This is exercise 17, and I'm just going to call it show hide Pat dash Homa R. You could put your last name first initial there, and show hide Pat, and then you could just hit enter, and there it is. There's your pen. And once you make your pen, it even generates a white background already. So we're going to do some HTML first. Very simple stuff. And I even have a PDF here. Let me zoom into this a little bit. This is going to change because there's some mistakes in it already. Matter of fact, I have fast name here instead of last name. So there's a couple things that might change, but it's going to be pretty much the same. So I'm going to try and follow what's on here. And that way, if I find anything that's wrong, I can update it. But we're going to use body tags, H1 tags. We're going to use a paragraph, and then we're going to put two buttons, and then we're going to use line breaks, and then we're going to put an image, and that's it. That's it for our HTML. So all these steps here, that's all it's going to be. And it looks like here I call the image ID pick. You could call it Pat, so it won't really matter. I guess I'll use pick since that's what it's in the notes. I'll stick with that. All right, so we're going to make body tags here. Let me see. Does it say to make a body tag? Yeah, we can make a body tag. And remember how easy that was? Body tab. There it is. Now everything goes inside the body tag. Just remember that. Then we're going to make an H1 tag. So we could just do H1 and then tab. And I think our headline is going to be something called show hide Patrick. So we could just type in show hide Patrick. You could put a dash or a slash or whatever, and that'll put it in a headline kind of format like that. And that's all you need. And then we're going to put an H2 after this, and you could just type H2 tab. And then in here, we're going to do two things. One, sometimes I leave this blank, but you could put "Where's Patrick?" We'll put "Where's Patrick" here. So the H2 is a smaller headline, and we're actually going to change that. And we could change colors and different things. But what I'm also going to do in here where it says H2, I'm going to go in here and give it an ID. So I'm going to do space, and then I'm going to do ID equals. This is how we put these attributes in HTML, and we're just going to identify that H2, just like we did the paragraph in an earlier exercise. And I'm just going to call it MSG for message, just as short as possible. We'll try to eliminate errors by making things as short as possible, keeping things in lowercase, because case matters when we're working with HTML, and especially JavaScript, case matters. So we'll try to keep things lowercase. And I'll save what I'm doing here. So we have our H1, we have our H2, and next we're just going to put a little paragraph. So we can just do a P and then tab. And then in here we'll just put an example of, and you can even copy stuff if you want to copy it from here. It says an example showing hiding an image using, you could even copy this if you want to, if you could copy it right off your PDF. That might work if you do Command C or Control C. If you go here, you might actually be able to paste it here, and that works fine. And there it is, an example of showing hiding in, I even have it wrong here, it's an image and not and image. An image using CSS and JavaScript. And I'm missing HTML. they should have HTML in here too, so I'll have to fix that. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's what it should look like for your little description. So we're using all these three things together. That's what's a little more complicated about JavaScript as opposed to Python. With Python, we were just typing Python and that's it. But JavaScript has to interact with some of these other things. And in this one, JavaScript will interact with both the CSS to change the opacity, and it'll also interact with the HTML. Let me close this little add down here. And what else do we need here for our HTML? We need button. And again, remember, all this is inside a body. So we want to make sure we're inside a body, even if you need to bump this down a little bit. And you can stretch this out as you're working. Then we're going to do a button. Now, a paragraph will automatically make a button show up on its own line. But when we put two buttons here, they'll actually be side by side. And even if we put an image will be side by side with that too. So we're going to do something called a line break to put the image below the buttons. But let's make a button. And I'm just going to type button and then hit tab. And there's my button element. And you can put a label on it. Now, it's really tiny right now because you don't have a label on it. And we're going to put one button that says Show Patrick. And there it is. And then we're going to make another button. And you could just copy this one and put it right below it. And this one's going to say Hide Patrick. And we'll put them right next to each other. And guess what's going to go down here? Patrick. Now we're going to put Patrick here, and before we do that though, he's going to go side by side here. After this button, we're going to put a line break. It's just a BR tag, and you'll see it pop up, and if you type BR tab, I think it'll come up. So I'll put 2, that'll break it so there's a little bit of space. You won't see anything happen yet, but when we put the image after here, it'll show up here. Now, you can search for an image. In the past, I had people just search for an image, and that's fine, or I have an image on a website of mine. It's in a GitHub site. I had to move it from my Home Studio one because it didn't have the S on it. And if it didn't have an S, CodePen didn't use it. It didn't like using it because it wasn't secure. So you could use this. You could copy this right from here. Now, unfortunately, I think it's going to hyperlink. It might hyperlink from here. So you know what? I'm just going to type it. It's not that hard. It's the https:// and then it's home of WCCC. And it's .github.io, and then it's /patrick.ping. So I'll try to remember that. Maybe I'll put it somewhere else so you can copy it, but I'll go in here. Now, before I do that, I'm not worried about that yet. First, I want to put my image tag. So I'm going to do img and then hit tab. And there it is. And this is where I'm going to put the source. And the source, again, is going to be https:// and then // You don't have to put in www. You could just put in Homa WCCC, just like my YouTube channel name, and it's .github.io, and then there's a /, and then it's just going to be patrick.png. And then you have to make it lowercase. Don't put like a capital P or something like that, and you'll see Patrick there. There he is. So if he's there, if you got it right, you'll see him. If not, then you mess something up. So make sure the quotes are here. If the alt tag is here, you could just put something like, Pat Pick or something. It's not that important that you have it here, but I'll just put Pat Pick. And then we're also going to put an ID in here. Now, an ID is an attribute just like source is an attribute. So you'd put it in the same way. So I'll put it right before source, and I'll just do ID equals, and I'll put a quote and another quote. We got to be careful here with the quotes because you put double quotes so it doesn't mess up the other quotes. You got to match up your quotes. So make sure you get 2 here. And I'm going to call the ID, you could either call it pick or pat. I'll just call it pick since that's what I used on the notes, so I'll call it pick. So the ID is pick. When we talk about changing pick, you can use that, or you could call it pat. I don't care which one you use. Just be consistent. If you call it pick, keep it pick. If you call it pat, then you're going to use pat in your JavaScript. So we have Patrick here, and this is our HTML. So we don't have to do anything else with our HTML right now. Remember, any kind of styling and coloring and anything like that, we're going to do through CSS. So let's go and do a little CSS. Here we go. So in our CSS, we're going to just target body, and we're going to put our curly braces and hit enter. And then in here, I'm going to make a margin first and just a colon, and it's going to be all around, and I'll make it 36 pixels. That'll just look a little nicer. We'll have a little margin going around. So that's the margin right there. And then we can change the font to make it a little bit bigger. We'll go font size. We'll leave the font family as it is for now, and I'll go with font size, and I'll just make it 110% just to make it a little bit bigger. There, it's a little bit bigger. Now we are going to make Patrick smaller so he could fit in there, so we'll adjust Patrick. We could use a % for that too. Now one other thing I'm going to do is change the background color. Now you can go search for background color from assets, but what would be more fun would be using hex. So if you chose background color, and you could just start typing it and choose background color, you don't want to use that fancy assets thing. You want to put in your own hex color. I know you've been waiting to do that ever since you learned about hex. And remember what blue is. Blue is just FFs at the end, RGB. So you could go 0000FF. And I'll put a semicolon. Now there's blue. Now obviously that's too dark of a blue, but what you can do is lighten up the other ones. Now you can go here and maybe do something like AA, and then go here and do AA, and that should make it kind of a light blue. And even if you want it a little more greener, you could maybe take the AA, that's the red, down so there's more yellow. And what's less than AA? Well, 99. You could go down from there, even something like 66, I think I tried. And now you get more of an aqua kind of blue there because you have more yellow in it. You have a higher yellow, the highest blue, and then not as much red. So it pulls some of the red out and makes it a little more kind of ocean blue. So that looks pretty good, and it's fairly readable, and I'm going to stick with that. Plus it was fun using hex. Wasn't that fun? Next, what we're going to do is target Patrick, I believe, unless we're going to target we'll target the H1 later. I'm just going to put H1 because we'll target H1, and I'm going to use a different font. We'll use a web font for that, but I'll just leave that alone for now. Now, if you don't put anything in here, it won't hurt anything. Just make sure you finish it off. Make sure you put 2 curly braces. So we'll adjust that later. And then I'm going to do my image. Now, we only have one image, so I could use image, but we have a ID name. If we want to target the picture of Pat, we can use this pick name because we had ID equals pick. So we could use that. That's a good way for JavaScript to target it. So JavaScript's going to want to use that name too because we have a method called getElementById that we're going to use. So that's why we're going to use an ID here. So after this one, H1, which is empty right now, and we'll put something in there, I'm going to target pick. And remember, to target an ID, you put the £sign and just do PIC. And then we'll just target that just like we would image. So this is the same thing as image. And I'm going to make a width, and I'm going to use a percentage because I'm not sure how big he is right now. But let's try something like, 70% and see what happens. Now you might have to do a save to watch it update. Anything happen there? Let me try 60. Oh, there we go. That's working. Let me try 50. Okay, that looks a little better. It doesn't seem 50% of the size, but that's fine. That's fine right now as far as the width. So we just put in a percentage in there, and you could put pixels in there. You could put different units in there, but width is fine, and you could just do it by eye. So there he is right now. And the other thing I'm going to do is put opacity. Put opacity. Now you could put 0. If you put 0, he'll disappear, which is fine. Now if you want to still see him there, you could do something like 0.3 or something just to have him there a little bit, just to know that it's working. So I might do that just so you see him there, and it also helps to know that the image is working as well. So I'll put that at 0.3, then we'll change it to 0 when we get things working here. So that's about it of the CSS. Now we could do a web font here, and what I'll do for this one, this is the H1, and I'll go in here, and first of all I'll give it a color, because I'll give it a nice color, and I will go into assets to find the color. I'll find a nice, and maybe I'll do, that looks a little darker. And you can X out, or if you just click over here, that'll go away. And I'll just paste this here. And that looks better. Now we're going to put a thicker font, so that'll be okay. We'll put a bigger font. And we could even make it bigger if you want to. We can adjust the size a little bit. I could even put font size, I'll put 120%. So hopefully it'll make it bigger from whatever it is now for just the H1. And actually it's not, because an H1 is a special kind of element. Let's try something else here. Instead of doing that, let's just go bigger. Let's put 200% because it's an H1. It's a little bit different. I'll go like 250 and see what happens, because it's different than the regular font size. That looks pretty good. And we'll check it out when we change the font. Okay, so that looks okay for now. So we have our HTML, we have our CSS that we need right now. Now we're going to do some JavaScript. And actually, this would be a good place to take a break, and we'll pick up with the JavaScript in part 2.